Welcome to Educating the Human Potential. This is the podcast about optimizing education for a better society through a Montessori lens. My name is Biff Mayer.
And I'm Nicole Coman.
And we're really delighted to have you here for our little private chat. Erica is an associate professor of Italian at the Fashion Institute of Technology, State University of New York, and her research focuses on pacifism. She works with refugees and displacement and humanitarianism in modern Italy. But most relevant to our podcast is that she's the author of The Best Weapon for Peace, Maria Montessori, Education and Children's Rights. So we are delighted to have you with us so that we can talk
Thank you so much for having me.
As the non-Montessorian in the room, I have my first question for you. So, Erica, you're Italian, right?
Yes.
We spoke a little bit about that. What got you in? Why Maria Montessori? I brought up the fact that you're Italian because I thought maybe there was some kind of inspiration there, given that Maria was Italian herself.
Absolutely.
Did that have anything to do with it, or what brought you to her?
A little bit. So in Italy, before the euro, we had another coin, right? We had the lira. And Montessori was featured in the mille lire, one of the most utilized sort of like, coin that we could have. And the image was of this elderly lady who was looking at children from a distance. So I had that image of Montessori, and that was about it. I knew very little about Montessori. Mm-hmm. I will say that generally Italians don't know Montessori too much.
Interesting.
The method is fairly spread, but mostly in private schools. So it's not that, an average Italian knows a lot about Montessori right now. Mm-hmm. But what happened is that I was at university, I was studying history, and an incredible book came out. The book has a couple of sort of extracts from the book and translated in English. And it's by two Italian historians, and it's titled the Maria Montessori Scientific Feminism. And it's about how Montessori, until 1908, she was very much engaged in the feminist movement, in the Italian feminist movement. Mm. And I read the book and really liked it. And then I thought, how can somebody be caring about feminism so much for, I would say, 35, 40 years of her life and then stop caring about that? It just didn't make sense to me. Mm. And so I thought, well, how do you write a historical biography of someone? Or it is true that people might have phases, right? We could divide someone's life into different phases. Mm. But I think the principle really stay. And so that image of the woman sort of angel-like, looking at the child, sort of, with white hair. I mean, a little bit too tranquil for my taste, I have to say. Really didn't match with the feisty person who was protesting in the streets of Italy, who was, asking for equal pay for women and men. And, so the battles that she fought at the beginning of her life seem much more interesting to me than the image that I was seeing, in sort of books and hagiography in Italian, you'll say. So sort of books that tend to put on a pedestal. So I decided, well, let's see if there's more there.
Yeah.
If I can sort of tip the pedestal and see what's behind it.
And you certainly did.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You certainly did. I have to say, at this conference, I told several people who are Montessorians that we were having you on the podcast, and we almost had a live studio audience here because of how many people you've impacted
much.
With your book. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about Montessori mashup, your research. Is that the research?
Sorry, what is it? Sorry, say it again.
Montessori mashup?
Yeah, you called it. I saw somewhere where you said my research is kind of a Montessori mashup.
Meaning, no, I don't know. Where did I say it? No, that's okay.
I was so taken with it.
I actually read it somewhere. No, I did read it somewhere. We'll find it.
One way in which I could think of a mashup is that, I'm in a sort of, and that again has to do with me being Italian. Yeah. There's a lot of scholarship being done in French and Italian in particular, that is incredible. Mm-hmm. The work on Montessori and art, and it's not translated. Everything remains within the confine of the language. Mm-hmm. And so I have a lot of teachers. I meet a lot of teachers here in the U.S. who would be potentially interested in the work being done on these subjects, but they don't get access to it. So the fact that, sort of I'm in a privileged position in that I can read Italian,
Right.
And I live in the US. I've done observation in Italy and in the US. And I was a graduate student when I started writing the book. So I had the time to go, and I was supported to go to India for 9 months, which is where Montessori spends 10 years of her life. I feel a book without that wouldn't have been like sort of a sort of comprehensive work on Montessori.
Wow.
So maybe that could be it. Is that it?
I mean, that sounds like a mashup to me. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense with that is a privilege that you can read Italian and you can get that, those resources in that way, and then also be able to write this book, which you had mentioned, and I want to share with the listeners, it took you 12 years to write this book.
Yeah. I mean,
what do you think was the most difficult part about writing the book, or maybe it got you caught up?
No, it's, writing a biography is hard. And I don't advise anyone who's in grad school to write it as a first book. Because there's, the problem is that you have to know the person well, but also to be detached. Like, I can't write something that celebrates Montessori from page 1 to the end. Like, she is an exceptional woman. And she's a complex woman. It is impossible then, out of all of the pages of a biography, there's only positive comments.
It's been done.
It has been done, and I couldn't do it. Do it, and it would have been beneficial for my work. It was not the kind of book I wanted to write. And, like with every person, there are aspects of Montessori's life that I think have not been adequately addressed, that I think it is time to address them. As a person who firmly believes in the incredible work that she has done, I think that addressing those shades is important now more than ever. One of the hardest chapters that I wrote, and it took me, I would say, 2 years, and a lot of colleagues who read it, is the chapter titled Montessori and Mussolini. Montessori received funds extensively from the fascist regime, and from 1922 to 1932, she lived in Italy. She traveled a lot, but she lived in Italy, and she opened up school, and she had you read this letter that she writes to Benito Mussolini, to the dictator, and how do you come to terms with that? This is the same person who puts the who has such an expensive vision of the child, and, doesn't reconcile with these letters. And, lots of historians have said that Montessori didn't understand what was going on. And I think that's selling herself short. I think she did. And I think that she thought she could carve a niche for herself. And the book leaves it as an open question, because a lot of, instances in all of our lives are open questions that, it's hard to unpack. And it doesn't mean that I think Montessori was a fascist. Absolutely. It's just that I think we need to problematize it and not just hush it, put it under the carpet and hope nobody finds out. So that, as a historian, that's why it takes time, because you have to go to the archive to understand, was it a real relationship? Was she asking for something? Then therefore the letters are so effusive. Like, is that writing, does she use that sort of effusive writing with some other people? Was it a particularly hard moment financially for the family? Those are things that require multiple visits to different archives. And again, I cited Mussolini. She writes to Pope Benedict XV during World War I she wants funds for creating this organization for war-affected children. And even that letter is a strange letter, meaning she sort of writes for her audience. And so, how do you tease out that complexity? How is she appealing to the Pope, and what is she, how is she writing? So, it's
interesting. That's fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah,
well, she was strategic. Right?
She was strategic.
That's where Mussolini was where the power was. If she was going to have real impact on large numbers of children in Italy,
exactly,
she had to go to the government.
And this is another thing that I also came to understand by reading a lot of letters that she writes, which are not easy to find, is that Montessori really wanted to go back to Italy. And it's as human and as somebody who lives abroad, I deeply understood that at times. It's that nostalgia of where you first had success, or where you first worked, or where you grew up. She just wanted to go back there. And she keeps on writing about it, in different letters throughout the years. And it's a longing. It's something that she deeply misses. And, probably she thought, I could find I can separate myself and not interact as much. And I think that's a very human feeling that, I, as a person, could connect.
Of course. Tell me about the access you had to the information. It sounds like you got an awful lot of the information that you used from letters that Montessori wrote, or the letters that Montessori had written to her.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about, you mentioned before that there's so much rich stuff, especially early writing, that is not accessible to people in this country. And my experience is that there were a fair number of things that should have been accessible, but they were in closed vaults.
I mean, every archive is unfortunately a closed vault. I work a lot at the Apostolic Archive at the Vatican, and whatever you see has been selected before it's even in the inventory. And it's a matter of protecting the institution that has the letters.
Yeah.
I mean, put it very frankly, the Opera Nazionale Montessori, which is located in Rome in Trastevere, does an incredible job at keeping a library mostly. But when it comes to her early writings, they're all there, consultable. One specifically that I think should be urgently translated, it's about the juvenile detention center reforms in Italy. And Montessori, you can see that she starts thinking about the progression within the activities there. It's by observing children who are detained, probably young boys, not children. They're detained within a prison, and she calls for the reform of the prison system. And she comes up with, I think, the most beautiful sentence: for each school that opens, a prison closes. I think that should be, especially with the current crisis within the United States, it should be the banner of every Montessori association. It speaks volume to her work. So Opera Nazionale Montessori is incredibly available. I've been working a lot at the AMI archives in Amsterdam. But then I feel like if you go to the Montessori to AMI, you find the letters that she gets, but not the one that she sends out. So I was interested in those. And so there's a plethora of small archives that I visited. Montessori extensively collaborate with an artist, I would say from 1905 to 1915. And this is a small archive. It's not even an archive. It's a school for ceramics. The descendant of the artist still have the school. They have a box with like a lot of paper. And I just sifted through those letters. And
hence 12 years.
And 12 years. And 12 years and beyond, probably. Who knows? Montessori is an ambassador for the Italian Red Cross. I went to the Red Cross archives, the Apostolic Vatican archive when she writes to the Pope. Convents, I've been in India, the Theosophical Society a lot. Montessori collaborated with a famous Indian dancer named Rukmini Devi. I've been there. It's a lot of it's a lot of fun travel. It's a lot of fun travel. Yeah.
And I imagine you go one place and then you get pointed in another direction.
Right.
So you don't necessarily have them all planned out.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing leads to another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that. And so it's a lot of planning a trip that takes you somewhere else. I feel like that's the gist of writing a book. It's a very uneven trajectory through archives.
Yeah. Another question I have is, I was struck also by when you were talking about the way that Montessori's writings about peace were essentially public relations attempts to get her the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
And I just wondered whether you come away feeling like Montessori as a movement has really kind of suffered because of the attempt to sell Montessori as a saint.
That's a great question. I wasn't thinking about that when I published the book, but I think I've been thinking about it since I've been presenting the book. I feel there's a like the educators who come to my talks are eager to hear about Montessori not being easy to work with. They love it. They love the entrepreneurial spirit. They love to hear that she struggled, because we all struggle, and because most of them are women who struggle in a society where their work is unrecognized. And I feel like when they hear that, it's liberating. That's why I'm saying that the pedestal is ready to be tipped. Everybody is ready. And so, I feel there are ways to present Montessori's great work that show her as a human being. And I feel that people connect much better with that kind of image of Montessori than with a saint.
Well, do you think is it fair to say that she was actually bolder and more of an activist in her early career than later? Or do you think we just don't write about that because the educational, the Montessori method had taken off? Because, sometimes I think of Montessori starting out as an activist and really finishing more as an entrepreneur when she was
Right.
really trying to sort of corner markets and protect her turf.
I think there is a moment in which Rita Kramer says that her work crystallizes. Like from 1913 on, she says like she's mainly selling a franchise. I mean, this is what Rita Kramer, the biographer, says. I mean, she says in a much nicer way, but
Yeah.
And I don't think that. I mean, it's based on my on the first thing I said, which I don't think that people live by phases. I mean, there are phases, but we keep on being the same person. And if you care about the rights of women, you can't forget about that. A lot of projects that she carries on for disadvantaged children are projects that also entail like sort of a rehabilitation of the women, of like, sort of men who have been physically affected by the war. And so I do think that her projects, we tend to read her projects as to be focusing on the child. And I don't think so. I don't think that Montessori was just thinking about the child. First of all, because the child learns so much and he or she brings it back to the family. So that's already one way of sort of spilling out of that sort of narrow vision on the child. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's a 1936 Montessori goes to an anarcho-socialist conference in The Hague, I think. I'm forgetting. It's in the book. So, and she talks about the fact that the panel was about fighting against compulsory conscription for the military. I mean, World War II is about to start. By the end of World War II, Germany is going to send to the military children of the age of 13 because they don't have any more soldiers. Wow. So here you have a woman the climate was that of like the war is about to start, right? And she is saying that it is right to fight against forced military conscription. So I don't think it ends. I think she's distracted. She's got, the operation of running a global movement are clearly taking her time. But I don't think she changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, I'm dominating.
No. But you know what? I expected this, but in the best way possible.
I'd really like to know why you think the White Cross never took off.
I'll tell you. I actually know why it didn't take off. Maria Montessori mostly asked for funding to the papacy. And this is where my research started. Beginner's luck. I went to the Vatican archive. It is not an easy archive to navigate.
I can't imagine.
It's hard. And I just find, I think on the first week that I'm there, I find a letter that Montessori wrote to Pope Benedict XV, who had recently published a peace note. So it's 1917. He writes this peace note to all European nations in the midst of World War I saying, a truce without winners. Let's just do it. Nobody listens to the Pope, of course. And Montessori thinks like, maybe this person is going to give me money for my association. And she writes these series of letters that, get to the Pope eventually. They don't get to the Pope right away. And I could see who blocked it. Like, I managed to find out what's the Monsignor who blocked it. It's someone who cannot stand Montessori, but like puts a lot of brakes on a lot of projects. He intercepts the letter and he blocks it the first time. And then Montessori eventually, a year later, 1918, sends the letter to the Pope, which is a big deal. And the Pope lays out the White Cross. It's going to be an organization for war-affected children. We're going to focus on psychological issues. It's going to extend to all war zones. And the women affected by the war are going to be trained as Montessori teachers. A list of like 30 subjects these women need to be trained on, completely unrealistic, like from first aid to psychology and psychiatry, She also says that these women are going to be virgin and devoted to Jesus Christ. So she really, sort of like she's speaking to a specific audience. So she goes for it, whatever. And so on top of the letter, there's 2 handwritten sentences. And one, it says, great project, send her a letter thanking her for reaching out. We're not going to fund her. And then there's another handwritten note with a different pen that said she did not take it well.
Oh, my goodness.
The reason why she gets denied the fund, it's because the papacy cannot possibly give money to something that has to do with psychological health. It's
Right.
1918, 1917. I forget the letter, when the letter specifically is, but there's no way. I mean, no one else is doing it. This would be like a completely new way of thinking about civilians in general, not even children.
Sure.
And also the Vatican doesn't support projects that are not already up and running because they want to see what's going on with the organization. In the meantime, Eglantine Jebb was also, the founder of the Save the Children Fund, was also working with the Vatican. And what she manages to do with an organization that is already up and running and that exclusively focuses on material issues, so feeding the children and curing them if they have a wound, physical wound. She says, well, why don't we organize a Sunday where every donation that you get at Mass, you just give it to us. And so it's a much more practical project for something that the church can handle. And it doesn't have to do with the psychology of the child, which is an uncharted territory for the papacy in the second decade of the 20th century. So I feel that being ahead of time wasn't really something that was conducive to success at the time. I think that she could have probably asked for less and might have gotten some support. But with the White Cross, she also writes to Sigmund Freud. She got the right person there, but no money, probably.
Right.
She writes to a couple of psychiatrists in Milan. The letters are several, like to the mayor of Chicago. So she's just frantically trying. And, it just didn't work out. I don't know.
Has anybody tried carrying it forward since that time, or?
Oh, I get emails about that all the time.
I know people are trying to get you to do it. But
I mean, given how important mental health is in today's society, and again, I'm constantly now learning about Maria Montessori, and I think what I'm most impressed about is just how forward-thinking she was about mental health in children.
Absolutely.
And just that translates to today, where I think that's the number one thought in all of our minds about children in school, and it's a crisis. It's something that we really have to address. I just think it's fascinating that in a time where nobody was thinking about that,
absolutely,
she was writing letters to people in Chicago and Sigmund Freud and everyone in between to help get funding for something like this.
But specifically, like if we flatten Montessori to be just interested in the children, we forget that she was a trained psychiatrist, and that's I think it's a crucial component in understanding this woman, and something that gets so overlooked.
Yeah. I really like the way you talk about how Montessori was involved in education because that's where the children were, not because she was enthralled with the idea of changing curricula, that it was a tool to reform society. And then, I
mean, she says it. It's the best. It's a weapon. I mean, it's her sentence.
When you were writing this book, so 12 years, this is a long time, right? What do you think you discovered about yourself and during that time writing this book? And beyond the fact that now you're an author of a very successful book, and by which I want to mention that many teachers have told me that this book has made such an impact on them. And these are teachers that have been in the classroom for 20 years. So what do you think you've discovered about yourself after writing this book?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. Well, one of the things that I became a mom as I was writing this book, and that was hard. I work in an institution that doesn't have maternity leave or parental leave, and it was really hard to become a mom and not have that stage of my life being recognized. And I also was living with the idea of like, my God, there's the absorbent mind right in front of me, and I have to go to work, and I don't know what to do. It was really hard. I think it opened up like sort of such a rich vision of the child that I'm constantly, as I'm sure any teacher who teaches Montessori, going back and forth between having sort of a relaxed and calm understanding of my daughter, just being one human being among many, and then, sort of having instead that knowledge, deep knowledge of Montessori and her work. I think that's been, it has informed me as a mom, and at the same time, it has opened up like sort of an abyss of like, on knowing too much about these children that I don't want to know.
That's right. No, that's fantastic. I think I would anticipate that you spent 12 years of your time learning about this incredible woman, and now you become a mom, and you think about her and that practice and how you can apply that into your parenting, right?
And at the same time, they struggle a little bit with, I'm in an archive and I'm studying children. What is my child doing?
Right. Yeah, where's your daughter? Yeah.
What is my daughter? There's a little bit of tension of like that. I'm pretty sure that Montessori felt herself, and we all feel between like growing professionally and being your own human being and sort of like raising a human being. So
sure.
Well, she sacrificed an awful lot in order to
very
do
much.
the work she did.
Very much.
So it's in the best tradition of Montessori that you should go off to
very much a Montessorian.
My son used to call my computer Silver Hell because he resented that I was working.
Oh, geez.
What are you on to now?
Tell us what's next.
The Montessori book ends with the Montessori method being utilized in the Hampstead nurseries. And those are, so the children are evacuated from London during World War II. And Anna Freud and Elizabeth Burlington take on these evacuated children. The idea at the time that it was better to be separated from your family than to be under the bombs in London.
Right.
So it's a sort of a project that sort of signals the beginning of psychoanalysis for children and Anna Freud's writing. And she was a Montessori trained teacher, Anna Freud, and many of the teachers who ended up teaching in this school were Montessori trained evacuees or refugees, young women who evacuated, Jewish young women who evacuated from Austria. So the book ends with the idea that Montessori doesn't directly get to the White Cross never comes into existence. However, Anna Freud somehow manages to utilize the Montessori method with children experiencing war and World War II. Mm-hmm. At the time, Montessori is in India, so she's not directly involved in the project. But to me, it left an open question is, in the history of childhood, it is not a given that the best interest of the child is to be with his family. And that is something that it's an axiom until the end of the 1930s. Mm. With World War II and with Anna Freud, specifically with that experiment, we have come to understand that instead the best interest of the child is to be with the family. So after World War II, many families are separated. And so I started working on the idea of reuniting family. Why do we think that that's sort of the natural place for the child? Of course, it's a sort of a smart way of looking at it. I do think this place for the child is within the family. Mm-hmm. But the main question is, who do we think, what does society, who is worth being reunited after World War II? Because international organizations only reunited white and mostly Catholic or Christian children. Anyone else didn't get help, was overtly separated from their family, or on purposely kept separate from their family.
Wow.
So I'm looking at children, at families who were kept apart and family were brought back together. An example is the Fanali brothers, for example. They're two Jewish brothers whose parents perished in the Holocaust, and the Catholic Church, they are baptized in one of the Catholic institutions that hosts them during World War II. And in the aftermath of the war, the Jewish community wants them back. The family wants them back. Community, the community, I forget whether there was someone still alive, and the Vatican opposes it. And instead favors the reunification of a lot of other white Christian and Catholic children who had been separated from their parents.
Wow.
So it starts with Montessori. I don't think it's going to be another book on Montessori. But as I'm going back to the archives, there's a lot to be done on Montessori. And so I think that I need a moment of separation, and then I would eventually go back to her. And there's very little on Montessori in Austria. The group of teachers in the 1930s, a group of Montessori teachers in the 1930s was deeply connected to the Bauhaus movement. And I feel that there's a lot to be done in terms of sort of education to beauty and school furniture and school environments there. And I think at the intersection of art history and history, or
wow,
Montessori was an ambassador for I will need to brush up my German, but that could be fun. It could be taking another 12 years.
There you go.
Yeah. Or there's Montessori was an ambassador for the Italian Red Cross. So maybe something to be done with that sort of work in the outskirts of the city of Rome that I tangentially touch with my book, but it's not, I don't make too much with it, but I think that could be another interesting venue. Yeah, there's a lot. There's
Yeah,
a
that
lot.
was a big surprise to me when I heard you say Montessori was involved with a bunch of projects when the Casa dei Bambini in San Lorenzo district opened. That was not the first project for her.
It is
Most people
incredible.
think that.
I think actually that's one of the part that I mostly liked working on. So Montessori is with this very eclectic group. There's one of the first feminist writers in Italy. She's part of a group together with Montessori, an artist and a writer, and they all go in the outskirts of the city of Rome, which was deep countryside, very poor, and they establish schools for the peasants. The kids are mostly affected by malaria, so there's also a doctor, and they bring together a campaign that has to do with educating children and their families to take the quinine. But to take the quinine, which is the medicine for malaria, you need to be educated that's a good thing for you. Like, you got to trust the state. It's a recently unified nation. They're building the infrastructure of a non-existing state, and they're doing it on the back of horses in the Roman countryside. It's one of the most poetic image. I can totally see her.
Yeah.
I can see it in a movie, actually. I don't know if...
There are a lot of things we should see in a movie.
Maybe that's your next project.
Definitely.
There you go. You heard it here
Only
first.
if I can impersonate Montessori.
That's
though.
right. There you go. Erica, thank you so much for
Thank you so
coming.
much for
It's a
having me.
delight to
This
meet you.
was
Thank you.
fascinating, and good luck on your next project. And
Thank
I
you so
can't wait for the
much.
movie
And
premiere.
thank you for this project.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge contribution,
I appreciate it.
Yes.
really. If you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are, following the show on your streaming service really helps more people discover the podcast. Thanks so much, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. This podcast is produced by AMS, the American Montessori Society. However, the views that are expressed belong to us and to those of our guests. They do not represent those of the American Montessori Society.